You check your phone before you even open your eyes, not for anything urgent, just to check. Somewhere in the night while you were asleep, you started hoping someone had texted you. But the real answer for why you do this is far stranger than habit. It isn't about the person you're hoping to hear from, it's about what 4 years of screen time did to the part of your brain that used to fall in love slowly. Think about how love used to work. You met someone. You didn't know much about them. You had to ask questions, wait for answers, watch how they laughed, notice what they didn't say. Mystery was the whole engine. Now you can know everything about a stranger in 90 seconds. Their job, their ex, their gym schedule, their opinions on every major news event from the last 3 years. The mystery is gone before the first conversation even starts. And without mystery, something in the brain's reward system never gets to switch on. Here's where the science gets uncomfortable. Dr. Helen Fisher, a biological anthropologist who spent decades studying the brain chemistry of romantic love, found that early-stage attraction activates the same dopamine pathways as cocaine. Not metaphorically, literally the same circuitry. That high you feel during the first weeks of a new connection, that's your brain rewarding uncertainty, rewarding the not knowing, rewarding the wait. But what happens when you remove the wait? Psychologist Eli Finkel at Northwestern University has spent years studying how dating apps change the architecture of romantic decision-making. His research suggests something brutal. The more options you're shown, the worse you get at choosing any of them. He calls it the paradox of choice as it applies to love. Your brain, faced with an infinite scroll of potential partners, doesn't relax into satisfaction. It tightens into evaluation mode. Every person becomes a profile to be assessed rather than a person to be discovered. You stop falling for people, you start auditing them. This is the part nobody tells you. Swiping isn't dating, it's shopping, and your brain knows the difference even if you don't consciously register it. Shopping activates a totally different psychological state than bonding does. One is about acquisition, the other is about surrender. You cannot do both at the same time. So every night you spend swiping is a night your nervous system spends in acquisition mode, which makes it harder, not easier, to slip into the vulnerable, undefended state that actual intimacy requires. Now here's the twist nobody saw coming. The apps didn't just change how you meet people. They change what you expect a person to feel like. A real human being is slow, they have bad days. They take 4 hours to respond sometimes. Not because they don't like you, but because they were in a meeting, or asleep, or just living their life. But your brain has now spent years getting trained on a feed that responds instantly. A like, a notification, a new match within seconds. Researcher Jean Twenge, who has tracked generational shifts in psychology for over 25 years, found a measurable rise in anxiety and a measurable drop in face-to-face social interaction beginning almost exactly when smartphones became universal among young adults. The timing isn't a coincidence. It's a transition. You didn't just gain a device, you traded one nervous system for another. So when a real person is slow to respond, what happens in your body? Not in your logical mind. In your body. A flicker of panic, a subtle read of abandonment, a tiny irrational certainty that something is wrong. That feeling isn't about them. It's about a brain that has been trained by infinite, instant feedback loops to interpret any gap in stimulation as a threat. This is why so many modern relationships die in the in-between moments. Not in the big fights, in the silences, in the unanswered texts, in the 3 hours where nothing happens and your mind fills the gap with worst-case scenarios. You were never taught how to sit in uncertainty because nothing in your daily digital life requires you to. Every other app rewards you within seconds. Love is the one space left that doesn't, and you weren't built by your environment to tolerate that. Here's the historical reframe that makes this even stranger. For most of human history, waiting was the entire courtship process. Letters took weeks. Suitors had to wait outside windows. Entire novels were written about the agony of not knowing if someone loved you back. That agony wasn't a flaw in the system, it was the system. The not knowing built attachment slowly, the way pressure builds a diamond. Today, the not knowing feels like an emergency instead of a process because everything else in your life has trained you to expect resolution immediately. And it gets stranger still when you look at what social media did beneath the surface of dating apps entirely. Sociologist Sherry Turkle, who has spent decades researching how digital communication reshapes intimacy, found that people increasingly prefer texting over calling and calling over meeting, specifically because lower bandwidth communication lets them control how vulnerable they appear. You can edit a text 17 times before sending it. You cannot edit your face in real time. So the brain, given the option, gravitates toward the version of connection that feels safest, even though it's the version that builds the least actual trust. You are, statistically, more emotionally guarded with the people you're trying hardest to get close to than you were a decade ago, not because you don't want intimacy, because the muscle for tolerating exposure has quietly atrophied. Which raises the real question underneath all of this. If apps are designed to maximize engagement, and engagement is maximized by uncertainty, novelty, and intermittent reward, then what is being optimized for isn't connection, it's retention. You weren't necessarily failed by bad luck or bad taste in partners. Some of what you're feeling was, in a very real sense, engineered, not maliciously in most cases, just structurally. A system built to keep your attention will always eventually train you out of the patience that real intimacy requires, because patience doesn't generate engagement metrics. Uncertainty does. And the app's already learned how to manufacture uncertainty far more efficiently than any human partner ever could. So where does that leave you? Probably scrolling through someone's profile right now, half aware that you're doing exactly what the research describes. That's not a failure of willpower. It's a nervous system responding exactly the way 4 years of conditioning trained it to respond. The good news, if there is any, is that nervous systems can be retrained the same way they were trained in the first place. Slowly, through repetition. Through choosing, on purpose, to sit in a silence instead of filling it. Through letting a text go unanswered for an hour instead of 3 minutes, just to prove to your own body that nothing bad happens in the gap. Real connection was never supposed to feel instant. It was supposed to feel slow, occasionally uncomfortable, and worth the wait. You didn't lose the ability to fall in love. You just spent a few years training your brain to flinch at the one thing love has always required: patience with not knowing. And the moment you notice that flinch happening, you've already taken the first step most people never do. You've caught the machine in the act of teaching you the wrong lesson. The next text you don't answer in 60 seconds might be the first honest thing you've done in your love life in years.